Hi, I'm Brent Phillips, and welcome to video 1 of our series on spiritual investing. This series is really important because money is a big part of life. And I've seen so many people, especially in the spiritual world, where money is holding them back from having so many amazing experiences and giving so much to the world. I've seen so many wonderful spiritual people with great gifts and talents that just don't know how to move forward. They don't have two nickels to rub together. And I want to put together this series to help you to start to win at the money game. Not just to gratify your ego, but to open you up so you can focus your talents, your abilities, your passion into what you love that can make a difference not only for you, but also for others and the entire world. So whether your net worth is $5 or $5 million, I really encourage you to get through this series. Even if there's just one little thing you learn, it could make a difference of thousands, even millions of dollars in your life. And that's big. I think that's huge. So let's get into it. What is spiritual investing? Well, quite simply, there's different ways we can make money in the world. The most obvious way is to trade time for money, to have a skill, or to be able to do physical labor and take a job. And there's nothing wrong with that, other than you're limited in how much money you can make by how skilled you are and how much time you can devote to it. So that's where most of us are, especially when we're young. We need to have a job because we don't have the assets, the capital to do other things. But as we mature, as we get older, if we're lucky, if we have good guidance, we start to move more into an investor place. What does that mean? It means that you have accumulated enough assets that you can use those assets to earn income and to grow them so that you can support yourself and get enough money to live without being forced to take a job just to be able to pay the rent. So it's not so much about not working, right? If you want to retire and spend all day watching TV, go for it, right? I just think most spiritual people won't find that fulfilling, at least not for long. You're going to want to go and do something. And it doesn't really matter if you're young or old. If you have the health and the motivation, you're going to want to put your talents and abilities and experience to work to make the world a better place. And you can't do that if you have to work a job just to have enough money to pay the rent and pay the bills, right? I'm not criticizing anyone. I've spent most of my life in that place. But the real goal here is to let your money work for you so that you can then work for your passion, for your talents, for your abilities that can really make a difference in the world. Unfortunately, as an investor, we have a lot of obstacles up against us. The biggest obstacle, though, is the one we have the most power over. It is psychology, mindset. And this is enormously important. Even professional investors know this. One of the interesting things that happened to me was after I got my bachelor's degree from MIT, I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to go straight into the workforce or if I wanted to return for grad school. So before I graduated, I did both. I took a job for an investment bank in Chicago and I applied to grad school at MIT. And I was honest about it. I told both of them, I'm like, hey guys, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do. Let me do this job over the summer and then I'll make a decision. And I told my recruiter and he was like, okay, Brent, we'll start you on at an intern position. And if you want to stay on full time, we'll give you a lot more money and benefits, right? And MIT was cool with it too. They're like, hey man, you qualified into the program, right? If you want to postpone, this is the deadline, or if you want to come, just let us know. So I spent a summer in Chicago working for an investment bank. And it was so interesting because it was one of those situations where the recruiter really wanted me because of my resume, my GPA, my background. But the group they assigned me to didn't have any use for me. It's not that they didn't like me, it's just they didn't need another coder. So I spent most of that summer in the basement going through trainings because I had nothing else to do, right? And I went through literally 8 weeks of intensive training on trading and trading strategies and how investment banking works. And this is what I learned, that to be a trader on the floor, in the commodities exchange, at least in Chicago where I worked, that was a highly desirable job. Why? It was high stress, it was difficult, but you could make a huge amount of money. There were guys who were 25, 27 years old who were making over $1 million a year trading. So they got a lot of applications, but there was only so many spots, right? And this is what I learned, that 95% of the people that applied to be a trader didn't have the chops. And that was pretty easy for HR to filter out. They didn't have enough math, they didn't have enough logic, they couldn't think fast enough, They didn't have the instincts, whatever, right? So what they told me was that's easy to filter. They would have interviews and tests and assessments, and they'd have a really good idea of who might do the job and who couldn't. But here's where it gets tricky. Of those they accepted that had the chops, less than 5% of the traders lasted more than 6 months. Amazing, right? This job where you could make $250,000, $500,000, $1 million a year in your 20s, 5% lasted more than 6 months. And it wasn't because they weren't smart. It wasn't because they didn't have the chops. It was simple. They didn't have the psychology. They couldn't handle the emotions of trading, the big swings. Because when you're a trader on the floor like that, working for an investment bank, you're working with hundreds or thousands of millions of dollars every day. And there were lots of traders that the pressure would get to them. They simply couldn't handle it. They couldn't stay present and make good decisions knowing that the stakes were so huge. Sometimes they would get too down on themselves. They'd make a bad trade or the market would go against them, and you could lose $1 million before lunch. Easy. Other times they'd make a great trade. They'd make a lot of money. You could also make $1 million before lunch, right? And they would get full of themselves and get arrogant and think they could do no wrong and then get killed. So this is the takeaway. The most difficult thing to find for success in investing is the good psychology. The rest of it is kind of garden variety. That investing is about 90% emotional psychological. And it's about 10% what we might call investment chops, right? Your information, your knowledge, your analysis, your tools. And it's funny that it works this way, that investing it really is 90% emotional, mental. Because they say the same thing about professional sports. That if you talk to professional baseball players or basketball players or whoever, they will almost all tell you, they go, yeah, at the highest level, the game is 90% mental. Why is that? Well, everyone who makes it through the minor leagues up to AAA has some baseball skills, right? There's a lot of young guys who can throw a baseball 90, 95, even 100 miles an hour. Most of them never make the majors, or if they do, they stick for a short time. Just like the traders, they're gone in 6 months. Why is that? They don't have the emotional fortitude. They don't have the psychology. That's 90% of it. And I want to emphasize that. Investing is about 90% emotional psychological. The other 10% is pretty straightforward. And I put together this series because this is your edge. This is how you are going to succeed where almost everyone else fails. Because let's face it, in terms of the data, the analysis, the information, all of us small investors, what they call retail investors, right? Individuals investing, trading from their home or whatever, right? Not working for a gigantic multi-billion-dollar bank. We're up against a gigantic disadvantage. Why? You're trading against people like Goldman Sachs, right? Multi-billion-dollar company. They throw away, I shouldn't say throw away, but they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to have the fastest computers, the best information, the smartest analysts, the best reports, plus probably some insider information that they don't want you to know about, right? And you may think, how can I compete with that? You can. Why? The playing field is totally uneven in terms of investing in information and access. The big banks and the whale investors are light years ahead of the rest of us retail investors. But they have no advantage in psychology, in emotional fortitude. This is why this series is so important. This is going to be your secret weapon. I'm going to show you how to develop that emotional fortitude, that perfect psychology, so you can win the 90% of the investing game. And heck, if you get 90% right, then you're probably going to succeed a lot of the time, aren't you? You are. Even if you don't have all the same information and metrics and analysis that the big investors, the investment banks, the whales have, you can still be successful. So let's talk about this. So what makes successful investor psychology? Well, it's pretty simple. The primary reason we do poorly with investments is we're trading based on emotion. There is emotional reactivity that clouds our judgment. And in the investing world, they call this Fomo and FUD. What does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. FOMO, F-O-M-O, is the fear of missing out. So when other people are making lots of money on the stock market, on Bitcoin, on real estate, whatever, we all get a natural fear of missing out. We go, oh my gosh, my neighbor just made 100 grand on Bitcoin. I want that too, right? So that fear of missing out, that greed drives us to buy things at the top of the market. And then we get killed. Why? Because the big players, the whales, the investment banks, understand that we have bad psychology, and they send out lots of news to make us greedy, that make us jealous of our neighbors, of our cousins that are making money. And we then buy and invest emotionally instead of staying grounded and objective. And so we tend to buy at the top of the market and get killed. This is exactly what happened to me for most of my life. I thought I was so smart. I thought I was so clever, but I managed to buy everything at the wrong time. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. I bought gold and silver right at the peak in 2011. 10 years later, the silver is still 50% underwater, right? I actually bought a significant chunk of Amazon stock around 2014-ish, and I held it for about 6 months. It dropped 30%. And I was like, well, this sucks. I guess Amazon hit its peak, and I sold it. And since then, Amazon has gone up 1,100%. So I just want to make the case. I don't care how smart you think you are. I don't care how much knowledge you have, how much software, how much computer skills. If you don't have the psychology, you're going to get killed because you're going to trade and invest emotionally. And that puts you at a gigantic disadvantage. Even if you have great information and tools, getting 10% of the game right isn't going to win you very much, is it? No. Much more important to get the 90% right. So the FOMO is the greed. We buy things when they're too expensive because we're afraid of missing out on the big gains, right? The flip side of that is what's called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is when we see lots of negative news. Oh, the stock market's going to zero, or Bitcoin is worthless, or oh, nobody wants gold anymore, or whatever it is, right? So we get afraid that we're going to lose everything, and we tend to panic sell. And this is exactly what happened to those traders on the floor at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange that I told you about. This is why 95% of them didn't last 6 months. They would get FOMO when things were going up and they'd buy things that were too expensive, and then get FUD when things were going down, and then panic sell at a huge loss, thinking they were going to lose everything. So here's a simple piece of advice that all of you can use, and it's this. If you are consistently losing money on your investments, that's hard to do, right? Do the opposite. It can be that simple. That's a great starting point. Why? If you can consistently lose, you just do the opposite, and then you can consistently win. And it's funny, I have a colleague I met at a mastermind. He built a huge career out of this because he had been day trading for a couple years, and he had lost his home because he had taken a huge home equity line of credit to get a pile of money to day trade with, and he lost it all. And he had quit his job and didn't have income. And he lost his home, and his wife was going to leave him. And then he realized one day, oh my gosh, all I have to do is the opposite. And he started making money. So if that's you, just do the opposite. So let's dive into why we suck at investing. Now, there's a lot of reasons. Lack of clear goals, subconscious block, bad training, influences from our childhood. But the biggest one I want to call out is attachment to result. That's the one that wipes us out. That's the one that causes us to go into FUD and FOMO, to make bad decisions, to invest emotionally rather than intuitively or rationally. Now, intuitive and rational are both great choices. If you can do both, even better. But what we want to avoid is the emotional investing. And really, long story short, there's no conventional process that really works to get past the attachment, to give you that perfect investor mindset. But notice I said there's no conventional way. There is a way. And I'm going to share it with you over the course of this series. But before we forget, make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe. You don't want to miss out. There's lots of cool stuff coming. So long story short, how do we get perfect investor psychology? Well, first we need good training. I'm going to try to give you some of that here. You also need to clear your subconscious blocks. Lots of good ways to do that. Awakening dynamics processes, encoded audios, working with hypnotist, NLP, lots of good ways. I have my way. There are others. But the most significant piece is the awakening. Connecting to the quantum field, discovering the real you. So I'm going to keep this series focused on how we use these spiritual tools to improve our investment performance, to make more money, to become that spiritual investor. But definitely check out some of my other YouTube series. Check out the Quantum Field series for sure. Check out my website, because the awakening process will set you free, not only from your suffering, but also from your financial limitations. It worked for me, it worked for lots of my students, and I really encourage you to give it a shot. So if you haven't done so already, you might want to hop over to my website at awakeningdynamics.com. I do lots of live events. I would love to meet you, talk with you, answer your questions, do some interactive processes with you. But for now, stay tuned. We got another video coming up very soon to take you deeper down this rabbit hole of how you can get perfect investor psychology using these metaphysical spiritual techniques and make a lot more money than you may have ever have thought possible. I'm Brent Phillips signing out for now. Until I see you next time, take care and namaste.